All right, great. Yeah, so welcome to the Delegate Sync call. Today, the agenda is going to be, we're going to share some project updates. Um, we're going to also provide some updates on the Delegates program. We've just launched a new code release called Easter. We're going to review some Delegate program and slashing policies. We're going to share some things about Hermes, which is now open sourced and better than ever, and also sharing some more things about native staking version 2, which is a new staking mechanism that we've designed for Mainnet GA. And important part of today's call is also to share the Mainnet GA migration plan. As you know, for the past few months, we've been working on one aspect of it, which is swapping unstaked tokens, meaning ERC20 tokens to native. That's been going on through exchanges and also through our manual swap tools. And the second part that's going to be important is migrating the existing stakes and votes from Ethereum over to IoTeX. So we have a plan to take a snapshot of the ETH contract and cut it over to IoTeX. And there's also some optional address mapping that we'll review as well. So that's the agenda for today. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Zoom chat, or just raise your hand and pause and let us know. Want to make this call more interactive. But let's just dive right in. So IoTeX, we've been really busy lately working on a number of things, most specifically, Mainnet GA and Ucam. But just to walk through a little bit of what Mainnet GA will include. Mainnet GA is launching in May and June, and we were really taking this opportunity to launch a number of things across the network, across technology, across the ecosystem, across governance, and across independence for the network. So, as you know, a lot of the releases that we've done as of late are related to the public blockchain. We plan to make it more decentralized, developer-friendly, and more performant than ever. So, a lot of the mainnet alpha, mainnet beta, and the subsequent code releases have been focused on public blockchain, as you've seen. But we're also launching something that's kind of stemming from some of the enterprise activities that we've been working on, which is a consortium blockchain. It's a permission chain, permission implementation. And even unlike Hyperledger and things like that, it has a lot of new features that Hyperledger doesn't have, like user management and things like that. So, a lot of, enterprise work in China especially, public blockchain is not really viewed as the right approach for real use cases. So this consortium blockchain is very relevant for a lot of the things we're doing with the enterprise side of things. So we're going to share a little bit more about that later in the call. On the ecosystem side, this specifically is about, how do we apply the ecosystem bucket that's been reserved to kind of grow the ecosystem across two things, right? Across tokenomics, kind of linking different powered by IoTeX activities, meaning the devices kind of that are registered to the network across Ucam, across Pebble Tracker, and things like that. How do we ultimately link the success of those initiatives to the IoTeX token? And ultimately, another part of it is we're starting a exciting developer grants program for ecosystem builders, meaning people that want to build tools kind of off of our wish list. We're going to formalize that process and also accept more open-ended proposals from developers that are seeking to build things related to trusted data and trusted devices. On the governance side, we're expanding further the consensus delegates pool and also rebalancing some rewards. I've seen even Metanix and public payments earlier this morning kind of discussing the balance of fixed and variable rewards in the network, meaning the epic bonus rewards and the block rewards. So what we're trying to do is kind of parameterize some of these things so that they can be adjusted based on community votes and delegate proposals in the future. So the IoTeX Foundation plans to make a proposal as far as refined balancing of rewards, but ultimately those would be discussed with delegates and also voted by the community. So some things to expect on the governance side there. And finally, for independence, right? This is the one thing that is very important, is just to migrate completely over from this kind of hybrid model that we have using both ERC20 IoTeX and native IoTeX to only native IoTeX on IoTeX mainnet. And finally, as I mentioned, we have a native staking version 2, a new transaction-based staking design for higher scalability. So, a lot more detail about what I presented is here in the IoTeX forum. And I'm going to send along these slides after so you can kind of click on these links. But please do join the discussion on the IoTeX forum, and you can also reach out to us individually. Another big thing that is going on is we've been working a lot on Ucam, right? Unfortunately, the timeline for this has been slightly delayed due to the corona, as I'm sure all of us around the world here are feeling the effects, and I hope everyone's safe first and foremost. But we've been really working hard with our manufacturers partners, Tendis, and who kind of is going to help us with a lot of the distribution side of things as well. So we are shipping the first pre-orders this month. If you want to participate in that, this first batch of pre-orders is also kind of our beta tester we've been doing a lot of internal testing as of late, but want to bring in the community into this too. So if you're interested in being a pre-order, definitely just reach out to Lori at iotex.io. Also check out the website ucam.iotex.io if you haven't already. The timeline for this is likely coming to Amazon US in May and June, and then also thinking about some international Kickstarter programs to follow. But I think this is a different side of the project around now that we've kind of created the technology, we've built in IoTeX firmware and software into this hardware. The nature of the hardware business kind of comes into play, right? I think shipping physical products around the world during these times is tricky, but it's something that I think has a lot of promise. And there's some screenshots here of the actual Ucam app. I'm really confident that once it's in people's hands, to really see the kind of sophistication of the application and the sophistication of the privacy. So really excited to take the next step for Ucam. So do let Lori know if there's interest in participating in a further capacity from delegates. Another important thing that we've been working on is kind of several enterprise initiatives across trusted data and trusted devices. One announcement we've made recently is we recently were selected along with Anoop, who's the global blockchain practice leader at Amazon, and Mike McBride, who's the senior director of innovation at Huawei. We were selected as the new co-chairs of the Industrial Internet Consortium's blockchain working group. And the significance of this is that the IIC is an organization that kind of brings together. It's less of a standards development organization. It's more of a product testing consortium. So a lot of the things that a lot of the products that we have that are more reaching maturity now, the IIC is going to be a great sounding board to test those concepts and bring on people to kind of join in those POCs, right? So what I've listed here on the bottom, IIC has a great program. It's called the Test Drives program. It's kind of designing different proofs of concept with IoT enterprises. So that's something we're currently working on right now. This use case you see on the bottom is something we're working to kind of stand up as a test drive. It's called proof of process, basically using secure hardware and blockchain to not only prove the output of a process, but also to prove that the process itself was executed correctly. So a lot of the things that are interesting to enterprises is definitely this combination of secure hardware and blockchain. As you guys know, we have a great product called Pebble Tracker that we're also seeking to further expand. That's kind of in partnership with Nordic Semiconductor. So keep your eyes and ears posted on the progress of these, but a lot of great promising things on the way. And just to round out the last of the IoTeX updates, right? I think personally, I think we've been making a lot of great headway as far as reputation and influence in the industry, right? So not only are we getting a lot of great top tier crypto and mainstream media coverage, starting to more regularly be on CoinDesk and Cointelegraph, and also setting up a lot of thought leadership kind of opportunities. We are also publishing a lot of things in the International Business Times as opinion pieces. etc. But also starting to create a lot of new original content, more targeted towards the mass market, right? Everyone knows in the crypto industry, the impacts of what blockchain and IoT can do, but sometimes conveying that to a normal person that doesn't really know about technology, right? Why does this technology that we're building really impact people in their homes today, right? So yesterday, we held a special webinar with MKN and the Own Your Data Foundation regarding how to protect your smart home. This is also available for on demand as kind of like a rewatch. So definitely check this out if you have time. And we're publishing a nice report coming pretty soon called When Privacy Hits Home. It's about 13 pages of, just really our summarizing of a lot of the events around, Zoom hacks, around Ring hacks, and, how we can really protect ourselves. So some good non-crypto content as well. And finally, some, or not non-crypto, but, targeted towards general audiences. And then finally, we're making a lot of good progress again on the standardization side. So Xin, our head of cryptography, published 2 IEEE papers, which is a big deal here. So one's on decentralized framework for data authenticity. The other's on mobile payments using blockchain-based devices. So those are the last of the IoTeX updates. I want to jump into the Delegate program updates just to make sure we have enough time to cover. But if you guys have any questions regarding any of the things we talked about here, GA, a lot of these things are going to be announced in batches over the month of May. And, we're planning on scheduling different types of coffee chats, not really like AMAs where it's more one way, but just, setting up, blocking some office hours to discuss these changes with the community. So definitely join in on that and expect some announcements regarding that. Yeah, before I dive into that, any questions regarding IoTeX updates? All right, let's move
I think
over.
we are good.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, just saying now, we are good.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, we're gonna move on now to delegate program updates. So we've reached out to you guys kind of individually, but one thing that I want to make sure is that I've been circulating around a form that kind of asks delegates for certain information, including your latest email address, whether you not use hardware wallets to stake, whether you use Hermes and things like that. Please do, if you haven't already, do complete that form. One thing we're going to do is we're going to continue to reach out individually regarding updates like this, but we're also going to use email more consistently as a way to communicate, newsletters and more instructions regarding GA. So I think I've collected most of the emails from all the delegates, but please do, if you haven't already, please complete that form. But one immediate thing that all delegates should do is upgrade to the new mainnet version 0.11.1 before Tuesday of next week. So it's currently live and being fine-tuned on the testnet and will be activated to the mainnet mid next week. So please do take the time to just update as soon as possible to this code release. What this includes is delegate probation, which we'll describe over on the next slide here. It has performance and stability enhancements as well, and it patches an issue in the earlier 0.11.0 release. And what's really exciting, Easter is one of the last code releases before Mainnet GA, which will finally remove this version 0 point with a full version 1.0 in May and June. So been a long time coming, very exciting things, but please do make sure to update for now to 0.11.1. So we want to spend some time on something that's also, obviously very important to delegates, is around probation and slashing, right? These are two separate topics, one of which deals with something that's more of a kind of a benign activity of delegates that's missing blocks. The other is about punishing more serious activities which is about kind of attacking the network by double producing or double endorsing blocks. So what we're addressing right now is what we call delegate probation, right? We held a vote across the community last month, and basically the purpose of this this probation is to address the nothing at stake problem, and also to promote delegate accountability. Basically, don't miss blocks, right? Don't be unresponsive, don't miss blocks. So the penalty for unresponsive delegates, we're applying a penalty for unresponsive delegates that miss more than 4 blocks for a given epoch. So it's very, I mean, this productivity number in the future will probably be a votable parameter by the community. But for now, as something we're just introducing, I feel like this is very lenient. To me, it's pretty binary, right? If you're missing 4 blocks, you're missing all the blocks in an epoch anyway. But basically what happens under these conditions, if you're unresponsive, you'll be put on probation. Basically for 6 epochs, your voting power will be reduced to 10% of the original, which will kind of take you out of candidacy to produce blocks, but it also reduces the rewards you get by 10%. So it's extra incentive not to miss blocks, which today is just about keeping your your software up to date and also making sure your server is up and running, which for this type of thing, in my opinion, there should be little to no leniency, as this is really the job of any delegate to stay online. But this is something that we plan to activate. So please, double check your machines, make sure to always be online, and yeah, try not to miss blocks on behalf of the network. But I'm going to walk quickly over the second proposal, which will be coming later on, and also kind of formed through discussions with this group over time. But the second proposal that we'll be investigating later on is around slashing, right? This is specifically to punish serious attacks with serious consequences, basically to prevent people from attacking the network, right? So this is specifically for people that double produce or double endorse blocks, which we all know should never happen, right? These are considered purposeful attacks on the network. So for these types of situations, right, what the penalty is something that we at the IoTeX Foundation have specific preferences for, but ultimately the refinement of this policy, we want to hear from you guys, right? So we think that an appropriate penalty for doing this would be to slash, meaning not take out a candidacy, but kind of take the deposit of any kind of double endorsers or double producers and redistribute them back to the rewards pool. So this is something that we'll ultimately be refining over time. But I want to pause here. I mean, both of these proposals are not meant to punish delegates and make your lives harder. It's just meant for the fluidity of the network, especially for number 1, and also the security of the network for number 2. But I'm gonna pause here. I would love to hear any initial thoughts that you guys may have. Obviously, a lot of these things are not permanent either. They can be refined based on the parameters. But I think once the overall structure is set, we also have to consider the implementation of such practices. So, right, like one thing that we're trying to do is define policies that we're comfortable with, but have adjustable parameters. But yeah, let me pause here and just any questions regarding any of these things. I think most of the questions I had sourced were mostly about slashing. So let me pause here for a few minutes. Steve, did you have a question?
Yeah, hi Larry, Steve here.
Morning.
One of the questions, I mean, I do agree with the trying to get the cut down for the number of blocks being quite small. But one of the problems that we hit is not so much about making sure that the software is running. Sometimes we find it's running, but it just, I mean, it did it more often at the beginning, so it gets better, but it just gets stuck. So the process is still running, and it's only suddenly you realise that we're not moving forward and everybody else is. So it seems a little bit I think somebody said restrictive. It feels quite, as you say, if you've got a good setup. But the problem is it's not necessarily the fault of the delegate themselves, because the software is just, I don't know what it is, but it somehow just doesn't get past the consensus and gets stuck. So I'm assuming if in the future that doesn't happen, but at the moment, because that does happen, I mean we probably see it once a month, and then we just find we're about half a day behind. So in that case, we would get we would get restricted, or in that case, because we would miss more than 4 blocks.
No, that's a great point, Steve. And I think it's a big reason why we haven't implemented a kind of probation policy like this, which is definitely common across other networks. But I think specifically around the problem you said, right? Like, whose fault is it? Is it the protocol's fault, or is it the delegate's fault that they're being kind of unresponsive, or kind of these things? So these are things that we considered. I think I would love for Rowland to jump in with some thoughts here, but I think the stability of the chain with Mainnet GA should lend itself to fewer instances of any times of these things happening. But that's definitely an important consideration, right? What's the balance of, we obviously, this is not meant to punish delegates in any way, right? We want this to be kind of incentivized on both ends to, to advertise, to produce blogs, things like that. But that's definitely an important consideration. I think if we do see any instances like that happening, I think that's a good time to look deeper into, specifically around, how do we, not have those things happen. But any growing pains, I think, through this process should be beneficial for the network overall. Rowland, do you have any thoughts on these types of things? I'm not sure if you're at the computer right now. Okay. Yeah, I think Calvin also had a question here. How to prevent blocks missing 4 blocks is a bit too restrictive. I think, Calvin, definitely chime in if you have any more specific, you can explain a little bit here. But I think what you're saying is, maybe Steve had also echoed this, is missing 4 blocks in one epoch is a bit restrictive on delegates. In reality, like, if you miss 1 block, you're probably going to miss, I've never seen like anyone have like 29 out of 30 blocks capacity in an epoch. So if you're missing 1 block, you're kind of missing all of them in reality. The 4 blocks is just in case maybe some of the things that Steve had mentioned were could be possible to have the protocol kind of induce missed blocks. But let me know if that kind of clarifies this question here.
I think it's just more that, even with good monitoring, it's not necessarily possible to get to it that quickly. So I mean, so it's just so it's just it's just more of a comment. I agree with the thing in principle. It's just at the moment is that when we do find, maybe we're the only one who find that problem, but when we do get it, it's run into the machine, and if I'm away for a couple of hours, we miss a couple of epochs.
Definitely. Let me bring this back to the tech folks, and then we'll come up with some either some things to ease the peace of mind, or some things to directly address it from a technical perspective.
One question from our side: what safety mechanisms are in place to prevent it from kicking out too many delegates, to restrict quorum? Like, if you don't have enough delegates to choose from for the 24, because so many have been slashed in a given epoch, assuming that there was problems in an epoch over a period of six epochs, right? Like, if people are slashed for up to 6 epochs in a period of 6 hours, if there's instability in a global network due to like unforeseen network circumstances, right? What protective measures are there to prevent too many from being, like, if you slash 18 of the 36, right? What's going to happen?
Right. That would definitely be a case where we thought about this as well, right? We don't want to make the kick out threshold too simple, or else we're going to kick out too many people and consensus would stall. ultimately, these are, I still think these are situations that should happen quite rarely, right? Like, we've also thought about, the expansion of the pool itself, even thinking about mechanisms where, this isn't finalized, but thinking about mechanisms where we select a subset from the top 36, a subset from the top, maybe even making backups 37 to
I mean,
48.
that was a suggestion I had a very long time ago, right? To select like sort of 12 from the top 24, 6 from the next 12, and then 6 from the following 40 or whatever it might be.
Right. The
But
implementation was a little technically complex, especially given the combination of Ethereum and IoTeX kind of staking. But now on the native chain, I think that's something that it's kind of like two separate random selection cycles. So that's something we're investigating. But at the same time, that kind of helps to broaden the amount of participation from delegates that can produce blocks. But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily solve the original problem you were talking about it, because the way this works is if you miss a block during this epoch, that doesn't mean that you're going to stop. We can't just rip you away from candidacy in real time. It's going to be affecting the next block. So I hear you guys on this kind of question around what if this kick out works too well, or what if it doesn't work well enough? Then it has kind of negative impacts on delegates and also kind of network consensus. But ultimately, I think given the design of needing more than 2/3 of folks, and there's also kind of an overflow right now. If one person does miss blocks, that would be claimed by another block producer.
I mean, in that regard, it would be better, in my opinion, to kick out the unperforming node in that round, actively kick them out, because what you get is this overproductivity, right? Because the other randomly another delegate gets the other 15 blocks or 30 blocks that were supposed to be produced by that one, right? Like, so it seems that if say Metnix stops producing in a round, then IoTeX labs might get lucky and get to produce the 30 instead of us. But why not just kick us out of that round? Because it would be safer for the network to continue, right? Because why would you want in that active round a bunch of nodes that can't produce? And certainly, actually, just in the last 48 hours, with the 11.1 upgrade, I saw a bunch of nodes actually not producing, right? Because there was a reindex operation that they weren't aware of, so they just pulled it and updated it and from what I was talking with Simone, there was obviously a reindex that was quite faster on some, so all of those would have got slashed, right? Based on that upgrade, because they didn't appreciate that there was that reindex operation that could consume time. And from our calculation on our hardware that I tested on initially, it was about 4 hours. And I saw that with the other delegates, that they were sort of being brought back into rounds. So they would have certainly got excluded, but I think not just excluded, but kicked out would be better, right? In that active round, to bring ones in that would produce. Because if you lose, what is it that you need to lose? You need to lose 9 or whatever it is out of 24, is it? 12?
You got to lose 12, so 2/3 or 1/3, right?
No, I meant in the active round. So if you have 24, you need 2/3 consensus, right? So you only need to lose 1/3 of them who aren't producing to stall the network.
Right.
So if you replace those ones that fail to produce after 4 with the ones coming in, rather than just relying on the remaining ones, then you would have more capability to continue consensus.
Right. I mean, this also lends itself to the discussion that, we need to expand the consensus pool, which is something that we're trying to do. Either simply just expanding to more like a 48 and randomly selecting a larger set, maybe like a 30, and kind of rebalancing rewards to, make the block production more valuable for delegates. But, these things are all things that, we are digging into, right? Around what if there is kind of a newer code release that, has that indexing type issue, and then it would kind of stall the network. But what we're talking about here is really the balance of, making the network more fair, and ultimately, trying to maintain the uptime, incentivized in a way, right? But the way I think about this is, if we don't do anything regarding unresponsive delegates, meaning they just have to kind of let them stall out and let them miss blocks and let other people kind of pick up the consensus slack. I think it would have more of the same kind of impacts than it would about kicking them out. It's just if we reach a certain point where there's over 11 people that are kicked out at any one time, which is something that should really never happen, then that's where we start to it's kind of like the tail end event, right? Like how do we cater to that? So let me bring this feedback back to the team, and I think there's some things that we can discuss regarding some failover measures, for example, whether we select replacement delegates from a broader set, just to ensure that we have enough folks to fill in that 12-person void if needed. But yeah, good questions here. I see Nate from Consensus Networks has a question here about spanning the slashing consideration over several epochs. Is this something you've seen in other networks, Nate? Or kind of implemented in practice here?
I think some of the, one of the networks are on Terra. They've got, I think they're, to get slashed on Terra, you've got to be off for a long time. It's just the thought that, hey, if, it's definitely possible. Like you said, if you miss one block, you're probably missing all the blocks in an epoch. So if something's wrong, either with your node or possibly stalled on the protocol, maybe you want to, could we space it out over 3 epochs or something like that? That's 3 hours of downtime, but it may give, validators more time to just troubleshoot. There may be something to that. Just kind of spacing it out that way. Hey, there's still slashing penalties. Totally agree that, hey, if people aren't online, we need to slash them, but maybe there's a way we can kind of space it out to give validators more time to troubleshoot if something kind of goes wrong for just one epoch,
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think we'll take a very close scan of this kind of thing over the next month and a half, right? I think we can definitely. The good thing about this is these are policies, but can always be revoted on if we come up with a better design. Obviously, there's some technical implementation, like the complexity of these things needs to be considered, right? We can't make too many. We can't. Sometimes the design is you'll kind of see, and the reason why we're implementing a new kind of staking mechanism is because of the overall scalability of using a smart contract based voting mechanism. So I think the same thing similarly applies to some of these things here, where we have to balance the benefit and the technical complexity. But more discussions to be had about this. I think. In the interest of time, I think there's a last question here from Johnny from Lao Mao. Technically, is there a way to re-sign for a temporary time period for delegates to do work like maintaining or upgrade? So this is kind of a self-inflicted or self-defined maintenance period?
Yeah, I think I can take on the question.
Yeah, I mean, is there any way for me to actively, pause producing or to do some maintenance, and when I'm ready, I reach back? Is there any way to do that?
That's an interesting one. Yeah, kind of log out. Ron, any thoughts around this or any of the other comments?
Right. Usually, you should have a master slave nodes, right? You should have like a slave file for a while. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just in case that maybe both nodes are down or something like that.
No, I don't think so. Probably you should have another like a slave node up and use that one as your private node, and then upgrade your master and switch back.
All right.
Right.
And I do have another question. Is there any monitor to maybe a portal to see the productivity or missing blocks, like a real-time portal for that?
Yes, we do. So I think we do have like a script to start with, like a monitoring dashboard on your node. So I think you can check on the Bootstrap, like a repo we do have, which will give you the instruction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Simone had one comment here around he's actually seen several times delegates do miss just a few blocks in an epic. So that's quite interesting too. We didn't pick at this 85% number out of a hat, but we did look into. I wasn't personally involved in kind of setting this threshold, but I think we did look into the previous block history and things like that.
Right.
A
So-
lot of these things are isolated incidents around like missing blocks, right? It's kind of comes in waves, but you'd be surprised to see the overall productivity numbers. I don't think there's many delegates under even 99%. Maybe that's due to the fact that delegates tend to pick up blocks from people that do miss their own blocks, so that kind of ratio is reserved. But I think IoTeX Core, one of our delegates, had put together a nice kind of graphic of all the different productivity numbers across the network. But yeah, these are things that we'll kind of refine over time. I think all these pieces of feedback around around like delegate flexibility, things that make this easier for you guys, but also maintains kind of some fairness is really the balance that we're trying to seek here. So keep us honest. We want to keep this discussion open and field your ideas. And in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the next topic here. But there's kind of there's definitely some discussion going on here in the IoTeX forum. Another announcement we want to make is Hermes is a kind of a rewards distribution system that we provided to delegates even earlier. So I think even starting late last year, and basically it automated the rewards distribution, the claim, the calculate, and the distribution process on a daily basis. But we got a lot of feedback from Hermes users or people that voted for Hermes delegates that it was impossible for them to really understand who was paying what, because it was all being sent by the same multi-sig contract. So a lot of the work that we've done is not only to improve the robustness of Hermes, but also to make the user side of things and kind of the queryable nature of Hermes higher, right? So another great thing is we've got a lot of requests to open source Hermes, which we officially done. It's on the IoTeX project GitHub now. But basically, this is just a reminder for delegates that this is a great tool that I think is a win-win for both sides of the community, right? For delegates, it takes away a very manual and time-consuming process of distributing rewards, and for voters, it gives them kind of a daily cycle of when they are going to receive these rewards, right? And it's all kind of queryable. So if you just enter your IoTeX address and click a button, and it'll show you some summarized history of all your individual payments as a voter, and also past week, past month, etc. But for delegates, it's really just a two-step process. You just set your reward percentages and set your rewards address, and that's it. The rewards are then calculated and distributed every day. So we did get some questions regarding Hermes, specifically around what type of data from this process is available to delegates that may want to automate or send their own notifications. And the good thing is because this is entirely managed by smart contracts, it's kind of like using the IoTeX analytics tool. You can really query all the individual payments and the cycles. So I think a lot of the processes that you guys have built to communicate with your voters can still exist. It's just the fact that a big piece of it is automated. I think we do, this is definitely not mandatory, right? We want to keep it open, and however you want to manage your relationship with your voters is up to you. But I think that this is a nice tool. Personally, I think I've seen our tech team put in a lot of great work into it, and I've been testing it for the past couple of weeks and works very, very well. So this is also something we would love your feedback on. Maybe it can be even like a larger community project where we work on this together to remove the friction between voters and delegates. Ultimately the goal here, right? So just a plug for Hermes here. Definitely check out the open source code for those that are interested. and we'll be sharing more about Hermes in a post to the community next week. There's also going to be more voter-friendly website, so expect that to come in the next week or so. Any questions on Hermes before we move on? Okay. Finally, native staking v2, right? This is a, as I mentioned before, there's actually 3 native staking contracts out there right now. One of them lives on Ethereum, one of them lives on the IoTeX mainnet, and one of them was specially created for this Binance campaign that we had. So one thing that is also included in Mainnet GA is this concept of merging all of these smart contracts and their voting history into one new kind of what we call native staking v2, which is more of a transaction-based implementation of native staking. Rowland, I'm not sure if you want to provide some kind of technical type of explanation of what transaction-based voting is, but basically the reason why we decided to do this is because it's more flexible, it's more scalable to do so. Basically, rather than invoking a smart contract every time you need to make a change to a delegate, or this is more from a voter perspective, obviously, but every time you need to make a change, invoking that contract to do it will in a more scaled out IoTeX ecosystem would just not be scalable. So we've developed a new transaction-based way to do this. I think we're going to be posting some technical documentation regarding how this works, but ultimately the benefit is that kind of remove the reliance on invoking smart contracts and more flexible staking.
Yeah, I will weigh in here. So basically we have 3 staking, actually one on Ethereum, which is going away very soon. And another one is native staking v1. It's also based on the smart contract that deployed to the IoTeX mainnet, right? That is what is going on right now. Native staking v2 is actually coming, I think in next month or maybe early June should be coming. The reason why we are doing NSV2 is because for NSV1 using contract with a lot of downsides, for example, it's not scalable. If there are too many buckets in the smart contract, that makes like the chain, the protocol to go through all the buckets very slow. So I think that's problem 1. Problem 2 is we definitely want to do this native staking together with other economics as time goes by. By using contract, basically we lose this flexibility. I'm not saying like we cannot do, but it's very hard if we want change something within the contract, which is not good. So for NSV2, of course, it will be much faster, much cheaper. At the same time, we get more flexibility. Say if someone from the community, from delegates, propose we should do this, yeah, we should probably do that, right? Then we can do that pretty easily. So I think that's a very very good thing we want to have. So I think for here, right, I want to get you guys' opinion on like the 2 parameters we haven't decided yet. We have like some discussions, some internal kind of tendency to choose the 2 parameters. But how do you guys think about this unstake waiting period, right? So internally, we are looking at 7 days, 14 days. Why we are doing that? It's because we see like a current problem. Once for example, the token price goes up, lots of voters they will just unstake, right? So they want to do it like within 3 days. They will want to just sell it out. So which is very bad for the security of the chain. So we are thinking about extend this, to 7 days or even 14 days. Do you guys have any, suggestion, recommendation on this one, or maybe feedback?
Yeah, in the interest of time, we only have 12 minutes here. I think we can solicit some feedback regarding
That's fine too. Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, we in the process of implementing this more transaction-based mechanism, right? We have some additional design parameters. So one thing that's also going to change is that something that's very has large computational overhead on the blockchain is the fact that we have to calculate the decayed votes every hour, basically, right? So we are modifying that. So there's not going to be a concept of decayed bonus votes anymore, but there still is going to be the concept of stake duration on auto stake. We basically have made it so that auto stake is a convenient feature to maintain your bonus votes, but those will not decay over time. So we'll have more details around the specifics of this, but the first two rows here are ultimately longer term investments looking into the future. As Rowland said, too many buckets will stall the chain or make it slower to stake, and ultimately calculating that decay is something that we've realized is not scalable. So those things are likely going to change. Some other things we've been thinking about are this unstake waiting period. This is ultimately going to be a parameter, right? Again, not permanent, ultimately can be adjusted based on reactions from the community and the kind of the adjusted times. But ultimately the benefit is higher security for the network. The downside is less flexibility for voters. So that's something that we have to consider, right? Another interesting thing is we were thinking about introducing a self-staking bonus vote to encourage more stakeholders become delegates. This percentage that we're investigating right now is around 6%, and we'll have some simulations to explain the implications of that. And two other features here we're implementing is one is transferring buckets to another address. So this is convenient for users that maybe are have multiple accounts or want to migrate over their votes to another account to kind of aggregate. So this can provide some flexibility. And also registering on behalf of another delegate, this is meant to build some convenience for us to migrate over to Mainnet GA, which we'll dive into more about the migration right now. So yeah, in the interest of time, I'm going to jump into this kind of Mainnet GA migration plan. There's some things that all delegates should know around things that information that we'll be collecting over the next the next month, and how we're going to apply that to ultimately cut over all the activities over to fully native mainnet. So basically, there's two big things, as I mentioned, that need to happen before we establish our full independence from Ethereum. One is already ongoing, right? It's swapping all of the unstaked, kind of the loose tokens out there, right? The ones that live on exchanges, one that lives in your wallets. Those things are ongoing, right? Exchange swaps have been mostly completed. The exchange like Gates, KuCoin, Binance are all kind of supporting native IoTeX now. I think Gate and Binance are also running their swaps currently. So if you want to deposit ERC20 IoTeX into Binance, it'll automatically convert it into native IoTeX. And we're working with exchanges to accept those swapped ERC20 tokens and burn them. So we have a thread in the forum that kind of transparently shares the burning activity of those ERC20 tokens. The other thing that's ongoing and will remain ongoing for 1 month after GA launch is the manual swaps. So on the IoTeX website, we have a swap tool where you can go from ERC20 to IoTeX native. So those tools will remain open for at least 1 month after Mainnet GA launch. So any final loose tokens that you have out there can still be swapped. One thing that we need to do before all these Mainnet GA activities is the migration of stakes and votes on Ethereum to IoTeX mainnet, right? So one of the things that we need to do is collect some mapping details about you. There are some default settings regarding where your votes will be mapped, but if you want to change that due to some considerations, we'll review on the next slide, then those are things. But ultimately, what's going to happen is there's going to be a snapshot taken of all the ETH stakes and votes, and there will likely, there will likely be a maintenance period where we cut over to all that information to the IoTeX mainnet. But let me explain this on the next slide. So basically, the plan for migrating ETH and stakes to votes to the IoTeX mainnet, right? Things that we're going to be doing are collecting information from delegates over the next month to facilitate a smooth migration. Basically, these questions down here that I'll review in a bit. But prior to the mainnet GA launch day, we're going to lock the Ethereum staking contract and the candidate registration and take that snapshot of all stakes and votes on Ethereum. So, and then ultimately take that information, utilizing a 1 to 2 day maintenance period to import the snapshot to the IoTeX mainnet, re-enable staking and candidate registration, not on Ethereum, but on IoTeX mainnet. And ultimately that's going to be the point at which, the activities on Ethereum will stop and will be fully IoTeX mainnet compatible. So by default, what's going to happen is all of the Ethereum stakes and votes will be mapped to your corresponding IoTeX address, which shares the same private key. A tricky part of this is, we've realized that maybe less than I had personally thought, but there are many delegates out there that use hardware wallets to stake. Right now, just giving an update on the hardware wallet situation, right? For Ledger, we have been talking to these guys for probably the last 6 months or so, and this integration is finally in the final stages. The Ledger Nano S app is ready, but because the Ledger Nano X app device has a different screen, we're just making the final changes for that. But I'm quite confident that this should be all set before Mainnet GA launch, but we want to build in the flexibility in case that these things are a little bit out of our hands, unfortunately. Trezor we did get in contact with, and unfortunately they're going to only be supporting the I think the top 25 coins for integrations, but we're going to seek to build out a Trezor integration over time through developer grants. But basically, for any delegates that are currently staking with hardware wallets, we're recommending them to map their stakes and votes to a new address, which is kind of this page here on the IoTeX forum. So basically, you can enter any other native IoTeX address. So this is my address here, and the one that kind of maps to this corresponding address, but I can enter another one, and that's going to cut over the votes to that. So basically, the good thing about this is we recommend, especially for anyone that's voting with the hardware wallet, to do this process. But if the Ledger integration does happen to be completed before Mainnet GA launch, then you can also revert back to your original corresponding IoTeX address.
So just one quick question on that. Is that slot 0 then? Like if you're using slot 0, say in your ledger in Ethereum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Will the corresponding private key for slot 0 for the IoTeX app be the same private key, like pairing?
It will.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would once the integration's done or like approved and already then by Ledger, then you would actually have access to those tokens, right? That was like the one thing that I was curious about.
Definitely, and that's what we're really rushing for to build out this hardware integration, right? Because me personally, even right, I'm getting some native rewards. I stake with Ledger, so those rewards, I can see them, but unfortunately, I would have to break open my Ledger private keys to access them at this point. So I'm in the same boat as you guys here. Obviously, we're really trying to push for this, especially for delegates to appropriately manage their stake. But this. Unfortunately, this is probably the last of the growing pains regarding converting and swapping addresses and such. But bear with us while we kind of manage the Ledger integrations. But for those that use web wallet or command line tool where they're kind of actively using their private keys to manage their rewards, a lot of these activities are you can kind of just default to the default settings here. But for those that stake with Ledger, I'm going to be reaching out individually to all of you guys to discuss your situation, right? I think we have, if you've indicated to me that you do use Ledger in that form that I sent out, I'm going to be reaching out, any hardware wallet in that form that I sent out, I'm going to be reaching out to you to kind of guide you through this process and evaluate some options. But just a heads up that, given the nature of this kind of hybrid network, the last of the conversion, this is kind of a step that may be needed. So information that, I'm going to be reaching out to you guys for over the next month, especially those hardware wallet stakers, will be, will the stakes and votes be mapped to your corresponding IoTeX address or a new address? And finally, which self-staking bucket will be your primary bucket? Of course, there's also a default option for this. This is just like a registration consideration, basically. But we're going to ask you for a bucket number that you would want to be your primary I think what we call it operator address that holds the 1.2 million tokens. By default, we're going to pick the one with the largest amount of tokens, but if there's a specific bucket you would like, then we can also facilitate that. So yeah, all of the slides that we presented today are available. Rallen just jotted them down here in the Zoom group chat, but also be sending out an email with all this information and some other updates and things like that. But I think right on time, 1 minute remaining. We kind of have some time for questions. We can stay on. But for those that maybe have some other commitments, I know it's late in China. Thank you guys so much for joining us late on Friday night. But happy to answer any questions. Rallen and I can stay on and either discuss collective topics as a group, or if you have any specific questions for us, we're happy to just stay on here and address them. But yeah, just to review the things we talked about in the agenda today. So we gave some IoTeX project updates regarding GA and Ucam and some enterprise initiatives. We have talked about please upgrade to the latest code release, Mainnet 11.1. Had some good discussions around probation and slashing. I think the approach from here is we're going to observe how the probation ultimately is looking, and also maybe continue to stress test it on the test net, but also looking for your feedback to refine it and make it to achieve kind of the balance of goals over time. Hermes 2 is now open sourced and live, and introduced some new things about the native staking V2 that's transaction based versus smart contract based. And then finally, we shared some updates around swapping unstaked and loose tokens. And then finally, what to do with the staked tokens and votes as we cut over from Ethereum to IoTeX. So with that, I'm going to call it a day. And yeah, feel free to stay on with any questions. But thank you guys so much for joining. And we'll be sharing the recording of this as well as the slides via email. So thank you guys so much. Yeah, any questions? Don't you just shout, and we can just discuss any specifics that you may have.
For the maintenance in June or May, there is it downtime maintenance, or is it just freezing on the smart contracts for voting?
It's probably going to be a little bit of downtime, but what we have to do basically is re-register the delegate information. Right now, that delegate information is registered on Ethereum. The kind of the names that we've registered and things like that. So that the stakes and votes, as long as we have like a mapping destination where we say, okay, MetaNix's votes, MetaNix is registered on Ethereum as MetaNix, and will be registered on IoTeX as MetaNix. So that's like a clear cutover path, right? So establishing that path, and it's probably, we say 1 to 2 days. It's probably going to take like a few hours. We just want to build enough buffer for this very important process. I think we're still deciding on that maintenance period, but yeah, probably shouldn't be more than a day realistically. Cool. Alrighty, guys. Yeah, any other questions? Yeah, do just let us know. Always available to answer your questions either directly through email or through Telegram. But yeah, everyone here at the IoTeX team is really excited for these for this next quarter, right? I think a lot of the things that we've been working on have been, at the cusp of being launched, and now we're finally seeing them going to hit the market. So it's going to be a really exciting time for IoTeX. But yeah, as we kind of evolve from here, need everyone's support, and there's definitely going to be a lot of more delegate discussions around how we kind of refine the program and such. I think Simone has a question here. Not sure if someone already asked, is it possible to map the delegate profile account to a new address? Are you talking about the information that you've uploaded to the profile, like the
No,
text stuff?
no. I mean, currently my profile, Delegate profile account, the one that I use to update Delegate informations, is a normal MetaMask account. But I would like to have, because this account is very important, you know, we don't want to lose it. I would like to move to hardware wallet account. If this could be the opportunity to do that when we migrate to final mainnet, if I could generate a ledger address, convert it to the mainnet address, the corresponding mainnet address, and have this new one, the IoTeX Lab Delegate profile address.
Right. Yeah, I think that's, I would suggest that too, right? As you mentioned, I think this is a good time to make those types of changes, right? Follow up with me independently, all right? I have my own thoughts around this. Like, if the ledger integration was all set today, I would, you know, this would be very easy, right? But there's just that looming possibility that they don't stick with their word, which has happened kind of for the past 6 months, right? So that's the only thing. But there even given that constraint, there are ways that we can help you to do that. So definitely just reach out to me. I'll provide some thoughts regarding the process. Maybe, unfortunately, involving multiple mappings potentially to get. Actually, no, that's not true. Yeah, just so we could follow up offline some month.
Okay.
Cool. Alrighty, guys. Yeah. Any other questions? If not, we're gonna drop off for today. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll post this recording and the slides for everyone to review. Hope everyone is staying healthy and sane during these trying times. But you know, I think hopefully it's looking like the rest of the world is making great progress. U.S. is kind of slacking, but hopefully, you know, collectively as the world will get through this just fine. So with that, hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Fridays and your weekend, and we'll be in touch. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everyone.